So is everyone here?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final rounds of NPDA 2022. My name is Ashley Knuckles Clevis. I am your tournament director. It has been an honor to be here this entire weekend. I want to say congratulations to our two advancing teams. They will be saying a few thank yous before we get the round started. So congratulations to University of Texas Tyler and also to Rice University. Specifically, I would like to say for their names, obviously, I'm so sorry. Ayush Kumar and Mason Ramali, congratulations. And to Rice Universities, Jacob Tate and Maximus Renteria. All right, I'll get out of here and leave it for all of y'all to take on over. We'll start with the affirmative, saying their thank yous. But I think I would also be remiss if I didn't really quickly say our wonderful judges for this panel. From El Camino College, we have Liren Chang. From McKendree, we have Brent Nicholson. From McKendree, we have Rebecca Pastula. From as a hired critic, we have Emma Fletcher. As a hired critic from Lewis and Clark, Nadia Steck. From Parliamentary Debate at Berkeley, Trevor Greenan. From San Diego State University, Adeja Powell. From San Diego State University, McKay Parsons. And from the University of the Pacific, Stephen Furious. Alrighty. So, Rice, you have the floor.
Okay, I guess I'll go first so you can hear me first and last. Okay. First, I would like to thank Rice University and the School of Humanities for giving us an avenue to debate through, the George R. Brown Princeton Society. Even though I haven't traveled personally, they've bought me food, so that's good. I would also like to thank NPDA, NPTE, and the Executive Council for hosting great tournaments and being a very welcoming circuit to new debaters and like all debaters alike. I was specifically told to thank a previous NPDA president. I don't know who it is, but it's some dude named David Worth. I don't know what they did, but apparently it was good. So next, I would like to thank my parents for backing my debate endeavors throughout high school and through college, for picking me up late at night, to even sitting in the back of the room in rounds that I lose horribly in. It's just amazing to have you there watching me and supporting me. Next, I'd like to thank my high school debate partners, Ashley, Claudia, and Amber, for allowing me to be your partner and allowing me to grow as a debater and as a debate partner. Y'all are all amazing. I'd like to thank my coaches here at Rice. Dave, you're amazing. Know how much I hound on you. You're gonna have to get used to it. You still have 2 years with me. You're amazing debate wise. Just talking to you, getting to know you this year has been amazing for me. Shannon, I absolutely adore you. You're amazing in every single way, from throwing shade to debate prep. You're literally the best. Now, for people at Rice, specifically in George R. Brown Princeton Society, first, it's my hack. She's my rock. You are literally my #1 fan, and I am your #1 fan, and you're killing it on the speech side, and you're going to do great next week. For past debaters, Joel, Amy, Maddie, and Annie, just for literally being the best debaters last year. You're also welcoming to me and helpful when it came to my debate skills and how I can be better. Jason and Sonia, you are literally my inspiration for Rice debate in PTE 2019 finals, one of the greatest rounds I've ever watched, and you inspired me to join Rice debate. Alina and Kritika are literally the sweetest and nicest people I know. These posters in the back are from Alina, and y'all give the best PMRs ever. The best I've ever seen, and I wish I can just get to your level. Next is Kaya. Thank you for being my partner last year and carrying me I was literally trying to keep up with you, like from going 5-0 the very first tournament to breaking at Nats. You're literally an amazing person, debater, and a scary South Dakotan. And lastly, I like to thank my partner Jacob. You've had the most influence on my debate career, not just this year, but literally last year as well. You were the first person I met on the team, like in person. You're the first face I saw that wasn't on a screen. And from watching rounds to you telling me what to collapse to like running different drills, it was all also influential, and I cherish every single second that happened. You're amazing, and I'm gonna miss you. Time to run it back one last time.
All right. Wow. Here we go. So funny story. Actually, this is my second thank you speech of the tournament. We were 3-4 going into the last round of prelims, and we were like, oh, like that's it. And I've always wanted to give a thank you speech. So the entire PMC was like 7 minutes of thank yous. Anyways, Max read MG Theory. We collapsed to it. We went 4-4. Somehow we broke. And now we're here for the second time. And it feels really, really fitting because I always wanted to give a thank you speech. And this is really Ayush's fault because the first like national tournament I ever went to was the NPT in 2020. And I saw Ayush give like the most beautiful thank you speech of all time, which maybe we'll get another one here. But I just remember being there like, man, like I want to be able to like go up there and giving that speech, thanking people who have done so much to me. I'm incredibly fortunate that this gets to be my last debate round ever. There's no other way I'd rather go out the national finals, no matter what happens. But this fortunateness is only possible through so many people that have helped me get here. Mom, Dad, Xander, thanks for driving me places. I remember going to Macy's to buy my first suit. I still don't have a suit that fits. I think Mason's doing better than me in that regard, as we're about to see. But like paying for high school debate fees, picking me up from tournaments, giving me $20 for high school debate pizza because it was like $2 a slice. Like I would not be able to be doing any of this without the family support that I get. My grandparents, thank you for always asking about how debate went and being excited when I beat teams from schools you've heard of. Yes, Oregon has a good football and debate team. They're always really excited to hear that. We're debating against them or Berkeley or whatever. But I appreciate your support, even if you might not like me as much if you knew what Edelman was. So I'd also like to thank some of my friends. Sarah, you were my first high school debate partner, and you're still my best friend, not because of that, but despite that, I love you, and you're a huge part of my life. I'm sorry I don't text you while you're in Spain. Ash, I'm so excited to live with you, and I hope you don't have to listen to me give RFDs through thin New York City apartment walls too much next year, because we'll be back in person. Emily, thanks for giving me free coffee and support and letting me pet Gus, because it has gotten me through this season. I know I care so much about this activity, but you are always there to listen to it. Morgan, Skylar, Arturo, Eduardo, Zara, Shreyas, John, Moses, Sophie, there are too many to list here. It's crazy. From the community, thanks to judges and all the great feedback we've gotten. Berkeley judges, especially Trevor, thanks for letting us do crazy theoretical stuff that really lets us expose like the nitty gritty. You take forever, but the feedback is so appreciated. Texas Tech judges were incredibly formative to my career too. Ficker has given consistently some of the best RFDs on strategy. Max lets me read Sean McKay Sonic memes as a warrant. Cody was the first judge I ever ran a K I wrote in front of and gave me some great pointers on it. I want to shout out Adasia too for not just teaching me a lot when they beat me badly my first year of debate, but for being such a good judge for us. I remember earlier in the season you said you'd seen how much I'd grown, and that meant a lot because I think so highly of you. I also want to thank Zach Schneider in particular. I think that's a name that has gotten a lot of thanks this year, but cannot be enough. When I first got on the Rice debate team, I spent hours upon hours on debatevid.io checking like MPT rankings. Like it is so impossible to describe how essential Zach was to my debate experience, despite, not even getting judged by him all that much. For competitors, Mary and Rainey, I think you barely know I exist, but you were a huge inspiration to me in what I thought debate could be. Oregon, Alex and Gabe, you two have maybe been our toughest adversaries this year, but I think every time you beat us, and it was a lot, I learned more about debate. Yushin Mason, I am so excited to be debating against you this round. I love talking to y'all like about critical theory after rounds and catch up on think tanks or Deleuze. Y'all have injected like so much crazy cool philosophy into the circuit, and it's amazing. For Berkeley, Josh, you're an idiot, and I mean that in the best way. Thanks for being the #1 rice hack. Will, I loved your appearance behind like June during RFDs as like this like mythical being. It's so much fun. Amanda, I'm so happy we got our econ debate and also the time you read my own econ warrants against me, but I like to think we're united by our pop punk binges. Karthik, you were my first loss to MG Theory, so maybe you unleashed a monster, but maybe you are right and K's are cheating. Ryan, I'm sad you didn't pop by the prep room or show up to post round any of our judges. It's too bad. But Berkeley, y'all have always been the specter in some ways that I've changed in like the best way. You are always pushing me to get better. I want to give 2 specific thank yous to 2 of my favorite people on the circuit. June, you're one of my best friends in debate, even though I feel like I'm on the opposite side of your pop culture judgment sometimes. You are just fucking hilarious. And the Berkeley Rice Chat and Among Us games have sustained me, but particularly you have been such an inspiration, like in how you debate and just how clear and good you are as a debater. It's phenomenal. And then obviously I want to shout out Cam. I'm so sad I never got to debate you at this tournament. I wrote some fire warrants, and I think this is a compliment. Our A2 Cam file is the longest file in our entire Google Drive. You have been such a breath of fresh air in this circuit, and honestly one of the coolest people and debaters there are. I remember just reading poetry in our first round ever, and it's only ramped up into more. Oh my gosh, I'm just getting to rice. I get to be sentimental. I'm a senior. David Worth, I couldn't ask for a better coach, not just because of Weezer, but because you give us space to be ourselves, even when that means that we're going for insane things. You showed me that debate coaches can be good after a horrible high school debate coach, and you are so steady, so consistent, just everything I could ever want. Shannon LeBove, you know how to just kick my ass into line. You know like how to light a fire under me. You are maybe my favorite adult ever. You're a mentor, you're a friend, you're absolutely brilliant at debate. We'll be talking about something for like 15 minutes, and then Shannon will just show up and be like, oh, this. Like, it's insane. I also want to thank the School of Humanities, the George R. Brown Forensics, and everyone who gives us the opportunity to do this. To the Rice Squad, Jason and Sonia, like Max said, you are the blueprint. Like, you are the reason why Rice teams end up in things like national finals. For the 4 seniors, Annie, you're the archetype for Ks. You made me a K hack for the better part of my career. You have amazing drip. You have shown out so much this year to support us. You are just like the #1 support and an amazing writer. Maddie, you are the bane of my existence for the first few months when you'd laugh during our practice rounds, and I got better just so you'd have to answer me instead of laugh. You're a true inspiration to be sharp, competitive, funny, and just cutthroat smarter. Joel, you are so cool, and you better invite me to drill shows in New York. If Annie made me a K hack, you made me like a Lacan hack, which is probably worse. Not to mention the theory too. More than that, I love spending time with you and Amy on the porch last year. It was magical. Amy, I love you so much. You have always been the heart and soul of this team to me. For all you care about Rice debate and me, you're the first person I text about debate things because I feel like you truly get it. And you're an icon. Like, ¿Dónde está el huevo de Yimi? I still don't know. Kaya, we may foundationally disagree on theory and debate, but I'm happy that you got to win an RBI. You have the wildest stories, and they never stop coming. You bring the righteous anger to the entire team that helps us remember that we deserve this. Alina, Rice totally zooted is one of my favorite moments of my debate career. You're a phenomenal friend, a phenomenal teammate, just making all these signs that we have. You're a #1 friend. Okay, we're towards the end. Partners, Aditya, hey buddy, can you believe our middle school bullshitting ended up here? Alyssa, I'm sorry I never made a goodbye debate post in high school so I could appropriately rant about how great you are. You're an amazing friend, debater, and you're the one who told me about Rice debate when I was thinking of transferring. Krithika, thank you so much for being my lifeline into Parley debate. You used to hand me papers during my PMR with 3 big numbers of things to collapse to, and hey, it kind of worked. You are generally like the kind of debater who is supposed to debate and used to generate like portable skills. Thanks for putting up with Queer Deleuze, but in my defense, I put up with pineapple pizza. Max, you are fucking amazing. I've seen you thrive so much over the last year. That's not to say you weren't insane from the start. You won the first tournament of your sophomore year. You always just care so much. You want it so bad. You work so damn hard. And that's what the team has always seen from you. Like from the first tryout, we knew you were going to put in the blood, sweat, and tears. And that's what I've seen all this year. And then finally, I'd like to thank myself. I know that might sound kind of crazy, but I have worked really hard for this to prove myself in this activity. I didn't make the first cut for the Rice team. I was an alternate when other people quit. And I just made it on at the last second. And I think since then, I've always just, I don't know, worked very hard to show that I have something to contribute to that activity. And I hope I have. I'm very excited for this final round.
Right. I don't have a sore throat anymore, so it will be a bit longer. I hope, at the very least. But let us begin. Uh, I would like to thank the university for continual support of the debate team, in particular, Dean Neil Gray from the College of Arts and Science, the Department of Communication Studies, and Vanessa Joyner for their help, support. Without you, all the team wouldn't exist, especially Ms. Joyner. Uh, I remember when I joined the team, NPDA was going on, and it's kind of difficult to imagine what would happen if you weren't there. So thanks. Yeah, I am. Yeah, so that's it. Uh, but yeah, so let's get on. Massive thanks to Jopra for always being there with us through winter storms and every other thing. It's been excellent, and everything has been fantastic because of you. Uh, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of difficult to give a thank you speech in your senior year because much of the people you have to thank for are so many that you can virtually just sit here for hours and talk about them. But each one of you mean a lot to me, and I genuinely say that. Uh, Everyone in judging pool, including say Brent, Nadia, Rebecca, Steve. I'll never forget the round with Minnesota. You stuck with us. Much thanks for that. Trevor, Adeja, for recognizing the microaggressions within round mean stuff. They are not in a vacuum. They are stuff which hurt people. I know it's kind of sentimental. It's kind of strange for me to continue in this fashion, but what are you going to do? You have no choice but to listen to me. So keep on listening. Uh, I know I'm in a very privileged position. Many seniors don't get to say the thanks before their last speeches, which is a tragedy. Uh, in particular, I would like to thank Alex and Gabe, uh, Will and Josh, Maddie and Annie, Joel and Amy, Amanda and Ryan. It all, what do you say? There are too many people to thank, and if I was to go in order, I would keep on going forever. But I guess I have to. I would like to thank Allison, Kelly, Max, Serena, Lila, Dave Worth, Zach Schneider. In particular, these are the critics who judged us in our NPT 2020 finals. And had we won that round, I would have quit. That was the entire bet. We lost on a 3-4. We lost on a 3-4 decision. One ballot, Max Groznik, you traitor, you voted against me. I'll never forgive you. But if you voted for me, I would have quit the debate. And I don't know what Mason would have done. He probably would have maverick because he's too much of an we say exceptional human being to debate with someone else. But it's been a good run. It's been a good run. I often wonder why I did debate, and I have come to the conclusion that I do it merely because I like the people who are with us. I like the community. There's no reason for me to do so. No one helps me financially. I'm already on a full ride. It's great, but it's kind of a weird thing. I know I'm not very coherent right now, and the reason for that is because if I get too coherent, I might start crying, and that won't be nice because I have to give a speech. So I'll try to be quick now. I would like to thank Mercer for their exceptional criticism. I really enjoy debating you all. I would like to thank Hunter, Josh, Emmanuel. They're all our Tyler debaters. They have been exceptional and a great help throughout. Especially Hunter and Josh have made it all the way up to quarters, was it? Uh, Quarters, which has been exceptional. First debaters, I don't know what else we're going to do. I'd like to thank Jacob and Max. You're very good. You're good debaters. You're very decent people. I have always enjoyed our conversations, and I know I don't think I will get to talk to you all in person, but I tell you all, and that's the same for almost everyone who has been on circuit after the collapse of 2020. It's been a strange time to debate, and I recognize that, and I hear you, but. Uh, the memories which we have made along the way, even via these screens, will remain with us, especially with me. I enjoy every single one of your RFDs. I don't listen to them ever. I really don't. Mason listens to them. Mason takes notes. Mason is a good debater. I'm not. But there have been instances where I have told him to where to collapse, and I have won every round. I have a perfect record. But no, I don't know. I don't think I'm giving a very coherent thank you, but I genuinely mean it. Thank you all, every single one of you. If you're watching this, thank you. You make debate. You make debate a community. Many people disagree with that, but I don't really care if you disagree with that. But it is a community. It is a community of individuals who are together, who endure 40 minutes of speeches together, and genuinely are good people. I have met exceptional people in this room, and I hope we can continue this way. It's an incredible pleasure, and we are about to give our final speeches. It's kind of surreal, but I hope it will be worth your time.
That's a tough act to follow, but I'm certainly going to try. Thank you. I decided to go full suit. I come from a small, rural Texas debate team, Paris, Texas, North Lamar High School. And we did UIL debate, the University Interscholastic League, and we had to wear the full suits. I remember being 14, wearing a huge suit with pants that didn't fit me at all. And that was 8 years ago. And I've been doing this activity for nearly a decade. And I've loved every minute of it. It's been fantastic. I'm honored to merely even be a part of this activity, let alone be able to debate in this final round. I would like to thank the College of Arts and Sciences at UT Tyler, in particular, Department of Comm Studies. I would like to give a special thank you for Dean Gray and Vanessa Joyner in that department, whose continued support had allowed the UT Tyler debate team to survive and be where it is today. I'd like to thank my family. In particular, I'd probably like to thank my mom. I know that she was incredibly happy when I passed my my driver's ed test after the third time, because that meant that I no longer had to be picked up at 3 o'clock in the morning after a debate tournament where I horrifically lost, and there's nothing to bring back home. I'd like to thank my team members at UT Tyler, both current and present, Hunter, Josh, Emma, L, Melody, and Skylar. Y'all have been fantastic. And thank you all for putting up with our practice rounds. I know the first practice round I had with Josh, he's a mere freshman, first year doing Parley. And we did 8 minutes of case, and it was hellish. It was hellish. I'm really sorry about that, but I'm so glad that you're sticking with it. You have to be a strong person to go through all of that bullshit and still stay with it. I'd like to give a big shout out to the other competitors that are in the circuit. I've loved debating y'all. Y'all have made me a better debater. I'd like to give a particular shout out to Oregon, Alex and Gabe. It's unfortunate we didn't meet at this tournament to final rematch of our senior year. I would have liked that after NPTE, but that's neither here nor there. I'd like to highlight a specific round. I think it was at the round robin, where y'all read the Maoism criticism in the words of Soulja Boy, word for word, bar for bar, that we read at NPT the last year. That was a fun round. I'd like to thank Rice, TR. I'm so glad that Texas has closed out NPDA finals. This is a Lone Star finals. It's always been fun debating y'all. I'd like to thank y'all for being our opponents in my final debate round. Finally, I'd like to highlight a few members of the community and the judges. I could be here all night giving stories. I'm just going to rapid fire for the list so that we can get started. Allison, Max, Cody, Lila, Ficker, Kelly, Cody, Adam, Brent, Maria, Trevor, Adasia, Bridget, Serena, and Zach Schneider. Thank you all for being judges. Thank you for all of your feedback. Thank you for all your help in these last years. It's been great. I'd like to thank my high school debate coach, Christy Hodgkiss. She is an absolute institution in East Texas debate, and I wouldn't be here today without her encouragement. Even though she, made me the C team my entire high school year, high school, but that wasn't her fault. It was because all my partners kept quitting like 1 month into the school year, so I couldn't get partnered with an upperclassman. So I was always getting the short hand of the stick. I'd like to thank Joe Provencher. He's made me a fantastic debater, and it's an honor that I can get to know him. He is honestly one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. I find out new things about him all the time. Yeah, super interesting guy. I'm glad that he's my coach and I can call him a friend. I'd like to thank Ayush. I could not ask for a better, more brilliant partner to debate these 3 years with. I know that, as he already indicated, that our sophomore year was his first year doing real debate. He'll tell you his freshman year that he was fantastic at IPDA. He was quick to remind you that he won the first IPDA tournament that he ever went to. As a freshman, first month, that's a testament to Ayush's brilliance as a debater, or it's a testament to our circuit being a little better. I would like to thank our Airbnb hosts for coming back and fixing the AC. It was incredibly hot, and wearing a suit was not very fun until pretty recently. Basically, I just want to sum up that I love debate. This has been a fantastic experience. I've loved every minute of it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you to all of the debaters. It is an honor to be able to be your tournament director and to sit and see this amazing community that we have been able to pull together and continue to have flourish and hopefully continue to grow in the coming years once all this chaos is over. So we will be having in this debate round Rice University on the affirmative and University of Texas at Tyler on the negative. The topic for the debate is that NATO should, so sorry, I said it wrong earlier, so I want to make sure I say it correctly. Also doing all the tab things. No, it's just not showing up. Anybody want to help me out? Thank you. NATO should enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine and disputed territories of Ukraine. Thank you all so much. Best of luck in your round, and we'll see you at the award ceremony afterwards.
All right. Sounds good. Let's get into it. So I'm pretty sure we got hearers from all the judges. So if you're not ready, let me know. Okay. I guess I'll just start. The plan Texas, the resolution NATO should enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine, disputed territories over Ukraine, as long as when the plan passes the normal means asks during Flex 2 is the plan establishing a no-fly zone. It's impossible and unrealistic to do anything more than establish a no-fly zone, so anything else would be a theotic Russian action as forcing a means to establish and pass a no-fly zone resolution with the constant consent of a state whose airspace it protects us straight from the NATO methodology. 3 is the no-fly zone is a military operation to ensure that no aircraft operates in this airspace of a defined geographic area. This is what NATO does. It consists of both patrols and missile defenses, since there are both methods of ensuring there is anything flying above these empirics crew across the 5 of the Yugoslav wars. There was air and air defense. I mean, we are the most in the topic literature. Advantage 1 is Ukraine nuclear war. Uniqueness 1 is the war in Ukraine is raging on. There have been dozens of deaths and a continued refugee crisis due to the brutal fighting, ongoing Russian troops being sent, and human rights violations. It's unclear when the war is going to end. Ukraine is winning and losing in different locations, but there's no inside because of the long stream of conflict on the ground. 3C is making uniquely worse to have strikes from the air. Russia has air superiority, has been making a lot of airstrikes too. As a nuclear war is inevitable with the context in the context of status quo. Is a scenario 1. The Ukrainian counteroffensive is currently poised to start attacking cities in the Crimean area as their plan for defense is currently to engage offensively. It's a maneuver which trigger nuclear war because Russia currently has nuclear deterrence armaments within these areas. Their justification for their usage of nuclear will The second scenario is Russia thinks that it can get away with using one or two small nukes in the Ukrainian region because there is no Western involvement right now. Essentially, because there's no NATO truth, they will use one because the worst case scenario is that they just lose. This is occurring because Putin has no easy way out of the status quo. If he cheese, it looks like Russia just straight up lost to Ukraine, which is basically untenable. Link is one establishing no-fly zone checks for the atrocities in Ukraine. And Russia won't want to fly planes and drones in the air because doing so will provoke a NATO response, which would immediately trigger a war. Because if Russia eventually decides that they want to play chicken, there's going to be a time for a major decrease in structural violence too. As we definitely check both nuclear war scenarios. Ukraine is only going on the defense because they think it's their only way out of the conflict. The involvement of NATO shows that they can just play really good defense instead of going to Crimea. This is effectively what Zelensky has said. Because if there is a NATO air presence, there are clear repercussions to nukes, which I mean that Putin can't get away with just needing a nuke or two, which so the entire calculus changes. Sees that gives Putin a clear out in the status quo. It's humiliating to lose to Ukraine, but yeah, we saw threes. A NATO no-fly zone, at least the anti-nuclear methods A plans are enabled to intercept other planes, or at the very least attempt to shoot down missiles. Even if they can't do this, there's an additional mad checks instead. That means Western retaliation will come quicker because enforcement of a no-fly zone always comes with anti-missile defenses, which is missiles are decreed as elements of a no-fly zone. This means we can shoot down nukes after a no-fly zone. Internal links is one of the northern Ukraine leaders massive structural violence. The against crossfire are uniqueness happening right now. It means that airstrikes always affect most marginalized because they cannot escape, are necessarily already disadvantaged. It means worse necessarily structural. Two is one nuke triggers nuclear war. A utilization of one nuke breaks the covenant of man, and also means other countries think nukes will be used. Bees and no one knows where a nuke is going, so people think they're being targeted. So at least speculation. See, this means that just one nuke becomes being used as in Ukraine triggers massive deployment of nuclear arsenals to fire back and forth. The impact is one structural violence gets over. Most her at least continue to cause cycles of violence. Because outweighs the probability because this is happening right now in the status quo. And see, it's be a prior question K engagement because it doesn't matter if you are able to move classes if you're starving too, is a nuclear war a biggest impact because at least extinction nukes can cover the earth and kill off all oxygen-producing phytoplankton. These effective omnicide kills everyone alive. Advantage two is hegemony. U.S. Uniqueness is one of the U.S. hedges crashing out, failing in Afghanistan. Have led to the U.S. to look like they're capable of policing the world or being responsible for its safety. Because the U.S. is seen as having horrible soft power, seen as supporting bad regimes, and not caring about human rights, which causes internal opposition that shifts government alliances. Sees is perception like all hegemony use is seen as high carrying, which means it's tried to change perception too. Is Russia particularly key to call for U.S.-led NATO-backed Ukraine as a NATO partner, even if they're not a member. This is key to perception that the U.S. will come to the aid of their allies. Because the physical action is key. Empirics prove Japan is thinking of working Article 9 to create a physical offensive militarization because goal action seems as if the U.S. won't help if no co-proliferates. Sees EU and NATO is looking for the U.S. action to look how they is looking for U.S. action to look at how they didn't take action until U.S. started sending military aid. Threes multiple flashpoints in the world. South China sees that the U.S. is weakening its expanding territorial claims like, well, our allies absent strong U.S. deterrence and security guarantees. One side will strike due to miscalculation of fear, which will trigger nuclear conventional war. Eastern Europe, Russia literally invaded Ukraine because the United States looked weak and unable to back NATO. Sees Indo-Pac scenario, and India is afraid of losing power. Vaccine is bolstered by China, and U.S. looks looks less like a sustainable hegemon. This means that the administration is considering a first strike in order to take out Pakistan. Absent U.S. security guarantees that have historically checked back as any of these can go nuclear through a great power war proliferation. The link is one is allows for U.S. to reestablish itself as a hegemon. As NATO is seen as U.S. led for military alliance, with how NATO action is in Ukraine is based in U.S. congressional action, specifically Biden's order to aid Ukraine pull energy imported from Russia. Because it shows that the U.S. is willing to pay hardball implementing defensive a material action of militarization, meaning there is a bark to the U.S. by particularly key when it comes to alliances of China and Russia. Looking at the tension of U.S. together actions. These even if you win something that these don't happen, we see that perception checks back since hegemony is symbolic. Internal link is one. Multipolarity leads to war. A multipolarity only leads to war because always leads to war because only hegemony can stop back from jostling for the top of the Cold War. Proves how even two countries lead to massive amounts of proxy wars and nuclear close calls. BS flashpoints are all occurring due to multipolarity. Conflict in South China Sea is based on jostling between China and American allies to get territory and fishing rights, as well as global prominence, and as well as a conflict in perceptual in Eastern Europe and clashing spheres of influence between the U.S. and Russia. Ukraine is just a start, and the Indo-Pac scenario is pushed by all three major powers as a way to extend their hegemonic grip. C's point is that this would be even worse in the Cold War because there are so many nuclear powers involved. USA conflict was only checked by phone calls, or because there were only two of them, which means the multipolarity leads to miscalculation. In fact, one is a war goes boom. A is a conventional war leads to a massive loss of life at any of these flashpoints. Also, acts as an independent magnifier of structural violence because it makes it definite. B is conventional war brings other powers and due to alliances of power projection and multilateral war, which magnifies the violence. See, as the miscalculation becomes inevitable because there's so many nuclear powers, which means that some missile launch will be misinterpreted or someone will think they're being invaded. These are one launch triggers global watch, recovers the earth and kills all life. Cross-apply the impact from the first advantage. They're all about it. Vote for the best post-fiat policy option. One is policy education is most frequently applicable. Policy results in structural power that affect material living conditions is most proximal internally to also It's also key to knowing the state to engage with the policy. All we must understand how to engage with the status quo. Two is the state is inevitable. A is empirics. The state has historically gobbled up knowledge societies. B is the state is the main producer of knowledge, which means that our epistemology and ontology are shaped by the state. C that means absent state engagement can also always be crushed and or co-opted. B3 is a policy making fiat is good. A is a fiat puts our hands on the levers of power. Keep coalition building and alternative solvency. B, fiat is a prior question because after days within the current system, this is a prior question. Any alternative because no agency leads to nihilism is optimal. 4 is particularisms are good. Even if violence is bad, it's probably good for groups like the Pink Pistols to be able to protect themselves. 5 is PIX flow F. Legislative procedure approves. You can change the plan, but it's still under the name of the OG writer. D's the PIC is a warrant for the resolution. The PIC is an independent reason to vote for the affirmative because it is our version to say whether the resolution is overall good idea, and we're using the affirmative to prove this thing for the extra offense. 6. Do you want anything else?
Burdens.
Affirmative means to public state as fact formally and publicly. Upon which we do this, we are like, meeting our affirmative burden, which means you vote for us right here. Don't like it doesn't matter if there's an LOC if we just affirm it now. Upper for flex.
All right, starting flex now. All right, so it's going to be one off, case, and then another off.
Case top down or framework first?
Framework, then your args. Also, since we are on one computer, is it okay if we pass the text during flex?
Yeah.
So if everyone is good, we can go ahead and get started. Is the interpretation enforced in the context of resolution refers to compel observance or compliance with the violation they create a no-fly zone do not enforce when this necessarily predicated on their entire solvency mechanism. In particular, if they're only enforcing a no-fly zone, no-fly zone through normal means which they have considered. This necessarily means that there needs to be a pre-existing no-fly zone, which is the entire argumentation. This necessarily functionally makes it impossible to negate. Go to standard first limits. Predictability is the only internal link to accessibility within debates. So this is the class disparity which cut at the heart debates clash. No stable locus clash in the PMC means function impossible to negate, since the LOC is the only attempt to deploy new argumentation, which means they are affirmative always with their interpretation. Little say grounds establish equitable ground, non-typical affirmatives said negatives ground to near zero function to make it impossible to negate. Look at their entire framing argumentation. In particular, the burdens argumentation should be flagged and started. This necessarily makes it functionally impossible to debate. The functionally impossible to debate within affirmative visualization debate clause to function makes it impossible for your affirmative to function as such. You should prior both them second protocol skills research skills only more limited debate allows debaters to deploy clash and critical argumentation with which they can do more meaningful research on. This is an internally to all of your hegemony perception argumentation, because absent developing research skills, this will lead to serious policy failure, because we could not evaluate the affirmative to begin with. It will be deliberation, a more limited from decision making consideration of complex idea resulting in better deliberation both for debaters and the judges. This is a consequence. Absent the negatives interpretation is functionally impossible for you to evaluate their own. Consequently, you should vote negative and presumption. Literacy, ethics, access, portable skills are necessary for ethical debate. Without gaining skills to solve problems, debate becomes an exercise in meaningless pointing out a representation of suffering. This is how you should evaluate the entirety of the affirmative. Since you do not have access to ethics, absent the interpretation, it's functionally impossible for you to vote any other way. Go to voters. Theories prior groups of the games where play the game. Second, fairness. Procedure fairness is an axiomatic good within debate space. Provides accessibility and also internally to truth testing. After truth testing, you should presume the affirmative to be a prior false as a consequence. Vote for a third education. Class education is the only really impacting debate as consequence. Vote for us for competing interpretation. Restoration to the bottom. Now global decides. First, NATO enforcing a no-fly zone necessarily resolved in Poland proliferation. The acting state Duma representative has already said there's a need to denazify Poland. And Baltic states. This necessarily proves that any form of NATO action necessarily leads to Russia proliferating and moving towards Poland. Poland's Duda has already shown acceptance towards Putin's hyper-masculine leader image necessarily moves any move towards Poland is necessarily will be welcomed by Poland. Welcomed by Poland. This necessarily allows Putin to establish key allies within NATO flights, which within NATO. This function makes it impossible for your perception argumentation to function. More proliferation necessarily needs to nuke because of Poland will immediately proliferate in order to garner leverage over United States and NATO as a second. French elections decide that Macron is currently polling high. However, the only reason for that is due to his international handling of relationship with Putin. Macron has repeatedly refused a no-fly zone over Ukraine. The plan necessarily makes France come player, necessarily makes France look as not the leader of NATO, which necessarily makes it functionally impossible for Macron to secure election. The closest runner-up to Macron is Zemmour. Zemmour is a fascist. Zemmour has already declared that the French colonial empire was necessarily good, and moreover, he would move to conquer Flemish Belgium. This would create internal proliferation within NATO as France declares war on Belgium, which causes total collapse of US hegemony. Moreover, results in the conventional war within Central Europe necessarily makes it functionally impossible for your advantages to function. Also turns the entirety of the case, causing extinction because of France already has nuclear weapons. Zemmour winning the presidency necessarily makes it impossible for it to function. And next out is Romania. The Romanian planes have already been shot down by Putin, which necessarily makes it functionally impossible for your advocacy to function because US military is already overstretched as you have indicted very well in South China Sea. Necessarily means that any movement of NATO necessarily makes Putin act out against Romania, whose military is necessarily unable to defend itself simply because of NATO resources being hyper concentrated in defense of Central Europe necessarily makes it impossible. Necessarily makes Romania proliferate, which functionally makes it impossible for you to resolve because proliferation necessarily triggers Newport, which you have considered coming out of it. Makes a use of Newport inevitable. Next is Japan. South China says that the capture of Spratly Island by China necessarily makes it functionally impossible for United States to counter China in South China Sea. China Sea. Japan with any NATO action necessarily makes it functionally impossible for United States military to continue supporting both the Mediterranean and South China Sea because of military overstretch and Turkey refusing access to the waterways. Functionally means that Japan necessarily views as United States refusing its security guarantee, causing Japanese proliferation and military argumentation leading to removal of Article 9. Any form of Japanese proliferation necessarily makes it impossible for your affirmative to function because Japan is a warlike state, and ever since its existence have necessarily conquered and dismantled South Korea and China. This leads to further proliferation, causing nuclear war. Moreover, conventional war causes death to most amount of people. Next, Saudi Arabia. The Strait of Hormuz is necessarily currently controlled by NATO. Any NATO warships necessarily means that the access to total OPEC plus oil scenarios are necessarily controlled by currently NATO warships. Any form of no-fly zone necessarily takes away resources from the control of Strait of Hormuz. Functionally makes it impossible to control Iranian attacks. This necessarily means that it's functionally impossible to guarantee global oil security, which necessarily causes further proliferation. Turns your India argumentation, because India is necessarily reliant on the Gulf for oil supply because it doesn't produce any. Moreover, this also turns the entirety of Russian argumentation, because Russia and China will get together absent a total increase in oil supply. Oil supply necessarily causes the counter to U.S. hegemony. Moreover, results in a more strengthening of Russo-Chinese alliance from the Russo-Chinese alliance due to the Russo-Chinese sovereign fund functionally makes it impossible for your argumentations to function. Moreover, proliferation necessarily leads to a decline in U.S. hegemony. Necessarily means that there are a prior index go into counterplan. The United States should enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine and disputed territories of Ukraine. Solvency in NATO military overstretch is necessarily prevented by United States acting single-handedly. Moreover, this necessarily resolves for any NATO action and French politics. Is that because NATO is not acting. Moreover, United States unipolar hegemony is necessarily established. Romania, Turkey, Japan, etc. are not necessarily viewed, all except United States acting as a single actor, and NATO not going back onto its security commitments, which is an prerequisite for these countries to not proliferate, necessarily means that we are able to resolve also an independent advantage to the entirety. Argumentation would be the advantage of unipolar hegemony, because we supercharge it. NATO doing this only makes it look like multipolar institutions continuing and taking away power from United States hegemony. Moreover, we are the only internal link resolving for Ukraine because of our Poland and Romania scenario. This necessarily means that we resolve affirmative better than affirmative does.
All right, y'all know the drill. I'll wait for text.
United States.
Status of CP.
Unconditional.
What's an example of a prior U.S. no-fly zone?
Sorry, what?
What's an example of a prior U.S. no-fly zone?
Kosovo.
What's the link differential for the CP versus the AF that allows you to resolve for the Poland and Romania scenarios?
There are numerous. For instance, there is NATO military overstretch. Moreover, the commitment by the NATO to walk back would necessarily compel Putin to invade Poland. Moreover, the Duda analysis coming out of the LOC necessarily showcases that United States acting is necessarily distinct from Poland in entirety of NATO acting, which necessarily resolves. And what other did you ask? Romania. Again, the Romania acting would necessarily NATO acting would necessarily be complicit with Romania acting as a a consequence, Putin will view it as a direct enemy. Militaries or moreover, this will also be hyper extended by NATO weaponry necessarily being concentrated in Central Europe, making it impossible to defend the Balkans and related areas.
Sounds good. All right, the order is going to be. Okay, I guess MP3. The order is going to be the interp. It's going to be LOC order. So it's going to be the interp, and it's going to be the affirmative, starting with these like 5 mini DAs, and then no, sorry, I know I keep switching this. It's going to be interp CP AF. There we go. And AF is straight down, DAs, and the rest of case. All right. Wow. Last one. Okay. Is everyone ready? Speaking out for hold your peace. All right. The first articulation is going to be that we say that we necessarily are going to compel observance by implementing in the first place, i.e. establishing is always going to compel, but the second DA is going to be, this is terminally impossible to me. You can't vote for this interpretation in the first place. It's impossible to just like straight up compel any kind of engagement. We can't force Russia to do anything because that necessarily forces us to act outside of the actor of the resolution. If you can't meet it, that's going to be terminal defense against it. But the counter interpretation is going to be what we read at the top, which is going to, what was it? To enforce means to establish and pass a no-fly resolution with the consent of the state whose airspace it protects. The first standard is going to be precision. We necessarily say that this comes from the NATO handbook on its own methodology. It necessarily means that we have the most precise. We say 1, this is always going to be best for predictability because there's infinite number of dictionary definitions for things like enforce, but there's only one precise definition, which necessarily means there's an internal link to the only 4 stasis point where you can have deliberation. We say that that's an internal link to anything like topic, litter, limits, or ground because it necessarily controls the direction in which we are able to do things like research in the first place. The second is going to be multi-actor. Fiat is that using the articulations that in order to compel or force them to do, they would necessarily have to shoot down like a Russian plane in the airspace, which would mean that we necessarily have to feel that Russia would send a plane into the airspace in the first place, which is impossible because it engages in multi-actor field. Extended multi-actor field is always going to be independently abusive because it allows us to feel outside the scope of the resolution, which is going to outweigh any kind of ground burdens or whatever because it's necessarily independently going to be an instance of field abuse, which has independent links into fairness because it kills fairness because it's independent. So when you don't even abuse it if you outside the scope of the resolution. The third articulation is going to be topic literature. You can extend our articulation that when every time the NATO has had a no-fly zone, such as in Yugoslav, such as in Libya, or as in Iraq, the methodology in which they enforce it was always necessarily going to be different, which necessarily means the only way inside a topic lit to establish or to enforce it that's going to be remarkably consistent is going to be to just establish in the first place because the enforcement mechanism is necessarily always going to be different, which necessarily means that we are going to be way ahead on the questions of topic lit. We say that all of these are necessarily going to terminally outfray and outweigh any of their basic standards, but now you can necessarily go on to limits. The first is going to be terminally necessarily say you explode the number of limits because you allow us to suspect different methods of enforcement, which is going to be like a bunch of different methodologies necessarily always going to explode limits. We say that we are always going to be more limited because we are going to limit the affirmative down to one thing, which is to pass like this, to pass a no-fly zone. And that means that like we don't just have to get like infinite offensive enforcement on ground. The next is going to be ground. We say that things like precision and topic lit are independently going to control access, things like ground, but also we say that our version of ground is always most stable. Then you say we're independently unpredictable, but no, you can cross apply like all of our standard about topic lit. They say that like compelling them is most predictable, but we're winning this sheet. Move on to the CP. The first articulation is going to be both perm do and net benefit is going to be the affirmative. There's no reason why this can't happen at the same time, but the next articulation is going to be perm do af. There's necessarily going to be no articulation. They've already conceded that the U.S. and NATO are basically the same thing, which means that then having the NATO do this is basically going to be the United States do this because they're the only supporting in the first place. Go on to the net benefits. They say the first articulation is going to be that the United States necessarily can't do this yet. The United States is not currently deployed with this form of anti-air, which means that there's always going to be a stopgap. I.e., what this means is going to be particularly critical for Advantage 1 because it means the United States is going to announce that they're implementing a no-fly zone, but not be able to immediately implement it, which means that Putin is necessarily going to see this as one chance to get shit done, which necessarily means that we are ahead on time frame. The next is going to be the United States has no precedent for doing this. The United States has never successfully established it. Then you say Kosovo, but no, that was literally the NATO Yugoslav wars and airspace. The next is going to be this is particularly seen as an act of aggression, not allied defense. I.e., if the United States doesn't accept NATO, this is a break from current trajectories, which necessarily means it's seen as independently an act of American aggression, which means that Russia thinks that it's going to get attacked, whereas NATO thinks that it's going to be seen as just protecting an ally. This is a key differentiator and why we weren't necessarily going to trigger any kind of war, but we aren't. But the next DA is going to be that you are necessarily less powerful because it's seen as unilateral action by the hegemonic it's seen as unilateral action, which makes it seem like the allies don't have United States back in the first place, which is ultimately going to decrease its hegemony and thump advantage shoot because the United States always looks stronger when it has allies. This is why Iraq uniquely tanked the U.S.'s legitimacy because the United States went in there without any form of alliances. I'll go specifically on the DAs and explain why the CP doesn't resolve any of the DAs, so there's no net benefit here, but also like we say that doing both probably resolves for the DAs and the AF. Move on to the AF. Okay.
The first articulation on proliferation is going to be that they're way behind on time frame because it's necessarily safe for Romania or Poland or even for Japan to get nuclear weapons is going to be way behind right now in the status quo, i.e. that this is necessarily always going to take time because no one's going to sell nuclear weapons and they have to develop their own programs, which they probably can't right now, which means they probably can't right now, so it's definitely going to be years down the line. The second articulation is going to be that when it comes to Poland, hedge independently solves because we say that security guarantees in U.S. hegemony is particularly key for Turkey and Eastern Russia. That's the hedge war that they've conceded that the reason why Russia is adventurous into Eastern Europe in the first place is because U.S. hegemony looks low, which means that's going to be tried to resolve for U.S. hegemony through its form of ally support in NATO, but the second articulation is going to be that Russia literally cannot invade any other places right now. We tell you that Russia right now is engaged in a massive ground war in Ukraine. No articulation of how they can necessarily just shift all of their troops right there. But the next articulation is going to be term. We say that we said in that saying the president of a NATO no-fly zone allows NATO to establish no-fly zones over these other areas, which is necessarily able to check back 100% of the offense. The next articulation is going to be independent term. We say that if Russia invades a bunch of different countries, they're going to stretch too thin and probably lose all of those wars, which probably means that we're able to resolve them quicker. But then the next turn is going to be particularly the security guarantee. We say that because of this, because the United States is seen as standing up with an ally along with NATO, that's going to be particularly key. It means that Russia's not going to invade other countries within the NATO bloc. This is really fucking simple. Essentially, if the United States is standing up for something that is NATO adjacent, Russia's not going to be like, we lost here. Let's go invade another NATO country. That's not how it works. No on French elections. The first is going to be this determined on unique because France is necessarily looking weak in the status quo because Russia's like running all over them. The second is articulation that you're completely wrong. Macron is losing right now in the status quo because he is domestically unpopular due to like things like internal turmoil, like the worker strikes, which necessarily means we're going to have two link turns. The first is that war is necessarily always popular, which means that over engagement in war is going to supercharge the current presidency, which is that of Macron. But then the next link turn is this independently makes them look strong because it makes them look like NATO is doing something on the global stage. Even if France said they didn't want this, they can necessarily change their tune. They can necessarily change their tune and show that they are a leader. The next is going to be non-unique. No one thinks France is a leader anyways. And the next is going to be non-unique. We say Zamora is just posturing. He's not actually going to invade Belgium. No articulation of why it's realistic happens. Go to Romania. The first articulation is going to be literally all the everything I say about Poland can necessarily be true here, but the second articulation is going to be independently turn this because they say no that they also going to be hyper focusing on Ukraine, but not only do one, we say the hyper focus is necessarily going to be the status quo, but also the second articulation here is going to be that it actually moves more troops towards the NATO border, i.e. because they have to implement the no-fly zone, probably means they move more resources towards there in the first place, necessarily independently checks back. Oh yeah, I was gonna say how the CP triggered all this. Go down the proliferation. We say the CP is always going to be triggered because it's seen as only the United States having their back, not NATO. This is particularly going to be key because Poland and Romania don't have good relations with the United States, but they do have good relations with NATO, which means that if they see that only the United States will have their back, they're not going to think that they're necessarily safe in the status quo, but only NATO can solve them. Go down to French elections. We say the U.S. taking unilateral action. You makes France look like they missed the bus and they couldn't necessarily get behind it, which is probably going to mean that Macron looks independently bad because the U.S. has to take all the action. Go down to Japan. Literally cross-apply our uniqueness on the hedge advantage where we tell you that in the status quo, Japan is seeking to repeal Article 9 and militarize means this terminally not unique, but the next is going to be linked to an ally guarantees are particularly key because the reason why Japanese is seeking to militarize is because the U.S. doesn't look like it stand up. The U.S. and NATO don't look like they stand up for allies, which is necessarily able to resolve 100% of through us standing up for the ally in Ukraine. But the next thing in turn is going to be you can say that China gets afraid of the United States when it defends the allies. The next thing in turn is going to be weakening Russia independently weakens China in the first place, which means it's less likely to engage in these egregious behaviors. Going to Saudi Arabia, one is that this is not unique. Iran is playing nice because of the GCPOA and the status quo they necessarily want to side with the US. But the next thing is going to be linked to an ally guarantee. It probably means that Iran won't strike Saudi Arabia in the first place. The next articulation I want is that there's necessarily no incentive for this because Saudi Arabia and Iran just want to keep pumping oil right now because they necessarily make a lot of money for any kind of conflict necessarily going to throttle them and not benefit them at all whatsoever. Move on to advantage one. Advantage one is going to be a really easy beat because they're conceding 100% the uniqueness that a nuke war is happening right now, and the only way to stop it is necessarily going to be NATO. Is going to be NATO. This means that literally we are days away from the button being pushed. This means that we have global uniqueness. Even any of their GAs are going to be way beyond on time frame because we are only able to resolve this. We say the United States can't do this because the United States is seen as unilateral or aggressive action, which is probably going to agree with Russia. But you've conceded 100% probability that NATO necessarily is probably going to do things like give Russia is going to do things like one, put Ukraine less on the offensive, and secondly, make it look like there's going to be repercussions for any utilization of a Russian nuke. This means that we are way ahead on any of this advantage. This means there's essentially going to be tried to prevent nuclear war right now. Don't risk the CP or anything else. Any articulation value solved for this first advantage is going to be a massive backfill that we get back massive advantage to. You can also independently extend advantage to where we tell you that the usage of NATO is particularly going to be key. They say this leads to more multilateralism, but they can see that NATO is basically a puppet of the United States, so it looks like the United States is strong and the allies are behind them.
All right.
May we have the counter interpretation?
All right. Starting flex now.
Alrighty, it will be the T, the counterplan, and then the case. Mostly the thesis of the entire speech will be the world of the counterplan versus the world of the affirmative. Yeah. Okay. Incredibly easy battle for UTT KR to the point they've conceded all the counterclaim solvency. Starting off on the topicality extend across the we meet. There's no independent offense here. Means we can go. We don't have to go for it next. Onto the counterclaim extend across the counterclaim. The United States of America should enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine to dispute territory.